Part 4. The Fire Awakened. The silence that followed Dr. Finch's proposal was heavier and more terrifying than any they had experienced in Centralia. Ava stared at him, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Elias felt a wave of nausea. "Absolutely not," Ava said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You want me to let that thing inside my head? You want me to become a monster to fight a monster? That's insane." "It is the definition of insanity," Finch agreed calmly, "to repeat the same action and expect a different result. You played defense. You reinforced the cage. And it resulted in Croft escalating his tactics, destabilizing the entire region, and making you his primary target. If you hide, he will methodically hunt you down. If you fight him on his terms, with his kind of controlled magic, he will dismantle you. He has been doing this for decades. You have been doing it for 2 days." "There has to be another way," Elias insisted, his mind rebelling against the sheer recklessness of the plan. "We can expose him. Go to the authorities, the media." Finch let out a dry, rattling laugh. "And tell them what? That a man in a bespoke suit is trying to steal a ghost from under a burning town? They would sedate you. Croft's greatest strength is the veil of normalcy. He operates within the plausible. A mining tremor, a building collapse. These are unfortunate but understandable events. He is an expert at hiding his true nature." He leaned forward, his frail body thrumming with an intense energy. "Croft's power is based on control, on precision, on binding entities to his will. The GWYLL is the antithesis of that. It is chaos. It is raw, untamed, geological fury. You cannot out-control Croft. But you can perhaps unleash a force so chaotic it shatters his control completely. You cannot fight him with a scalpel. You must use a volcano." The terrible logic of his words began to seep in. Elias looked at the journal, at the complex, ordered sigils of the binding ritual. It was a masterpiece of control, and it had failed to stop the true threat. Ava stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the misty, peaceful valley. It was a world away from the sulfurous hell of Centralia. A world she was fighting for. A world she would have to sacrifice to save. "You have an affinity, a connection that no one else on Earth possesses. For Elias or myself to attempt, it would be instant death, or worse, instant madness. The GWYLL would annihilate us. For you, it will be agony. It will be a battle for your soul. But there is a chance, a slim one, that your will, the will of the bloodline that has stood guard for a century, can anchor it. That you can become not its puppet, but its warden." The choice hung in the air, a terrible, unspoken weight. Elias watched Ava, his heart aching. He had dragged her into this. His curiosity, his podcast, his obsession had led them all to this impossible precipice. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice so low it was almost a whisper. She turned from the window, and her eyes were not the eyes of a frightened victim anymore. They were the eyes of a soldier accepting her mission. "Tell me what I have to do." For the next 2 days, the library at the Quiet Mews became a war room. Finch, energized by the intellectual challenge, became their drill sergeant. He abandoned the Price grimoire, calling it a child's primer on containment. Instead, he brought out older, more dangerous texts, vellum scrolls describing Sumerian soul-binding, treatises on Egyptian vessel-making, fragmented Norse sagas that spoke of harnessing the Jotunfire. He pieced together a new ritual, a theoretical monstrosity of cross-cultural magic. It was designed not to seal or bind, but to open a conduit. The Price ritual was a lock, he explained, pointing to a complex new diagram he'd drawn. "This is a valve. You, Sergeant, will be the hand that turns it. And you, Thorn, will be the pressure gauge. Your job is to keep her from opening it too far, too fast." He tutored Elias on recognition signs, teaching him the subtle fluctuations in energy that would signal Ava losing control. He taught him countermeasures, Short, sharp phrases of dismissal, anchoring sigils to be drawn in the air, anything to pull her back from the brink. He made Ava memorize long guttural chants in languages that had not been spoken for thousands of years. The words felt alien and powerful on her tongue. He made her meditate on the lump of coal, the catalyst, forcing her to feel its cold, dormant power, to attune herself to its frequency. "You cannot fear it," he told her, his voice relentless. "You must accept it. It is not evil. It is simply power. Laïque arrivé. You are not trying to stop the river. You are trying to dig a new channel for it to flow through. And that channel is you." On the third night, they were ready. Ms. Albright, Finch's silent associate, provided them with supplies, durable gear, rations, and 2 small silver charms. "Wards of passage," Finch explained. "They will not make you invisible to Croft, but they may mask your intent. He will feel your presence, but he may not understand your purpose until it is too late. It is the best I can do." As they prepared to leave, Elias paused at the door. "Dr. Finch." "Alistair, why are you doing this? After all these years?" The old man looked up from his books, his eyes weary but clear. "Because for 30 years, I have been a curator in a museum of dead gods and forgotten magic, Thorn. You have brought me a living specimen. And because a man like Julian Croft must not be allowed to win. Now go. And try not to get yourselves erased from existence." Returning to Centralia was like entering a fever dream. The 2 days they had been gone might as well have been a decade. The changes were profound and terrifying. The seismic tremors they had heard about on the radio were now a constant low-frequency vibration that hummed up through the soles of their feet. The steam vents were no longer gentle plumes. They were angry, roaring jets of foul-smelling gas that scarred the landscape. The very air felt thin and brittle, charged with a hostile energy. Croft wasn't just rattling the bars of the cage. He was trying to smash the foundations it was built on. They left their truck miles away and approached the exclusion zone on foot at dusk, the silver wards from Finch cold against their skin. The charms seemed to work. The oppressive sense of being watched was gone, replaced by a different feeling, the unnerving awareness of being a foreign object inside a diseased body. Their target was the cellar, but they knew they couldn't approach it directly. Croft would have it guarded. "He'll expect us to come back to the locus," Elias whispered, as they took cover behind a ridge overlooking the valley. "He'll have his main defenses there." "So we give him something else to look at," Ava replied, her mind already working the tactical problem. She pointed to the east, toward the skeletal ruins of the Locust Run Colliery, the mine where Reese Price and her ancestor had first made their pact. The source. The binding was done at the cabin, but the pact was made in the mine. There's a resonance there. If we can create a diversion, a magical flare of some kind, it might draw his attention long enough for us to get to the cellar. It was a brilliant piece of tactical thinking, combining her cop's mind with her newfound magical understanding. Elias looked through his notes from Finch, finding a minor ritual for a sympathetic beacon, a way to make one place feel like another. They made their way toward the colliery, a landscape of rusting machinery and slag heaps that looked like the bones of dead giants. As they got closer, they saw the first of Croft's sentinels. It stood near the collapsed entrance of the main mine shaft. From a distance, it looked like a scarecrow, a ragged collection of sticks and old cloth. But as they got closer, they saw that it was made of rusted mining tools, pickaxes for arms, a shovel for a spine, a dented miner's helmet for a head, all held together by writhing coils of barbed wire. It was another of Croft's puppets, and it turned its hollow helmet toward them as they approached, a low grinding sound coming from within its metal frame. They froze. The silver wards might hide their intent, but they couldn't make them invisible. Before the sentinel could raise an alarm, Ava acted. She picked up a chunk of iron slag and hurled it deep into the ruins of a nearby building. The crash echoed through the silent colliery. The sentinel swiveled, its attention drawn to the sound, and began to lurch toward it with a clanking, scraping gait. They slipped past, their hearts hammering. They found a sheltered spot within the ruins of the old pump house and quickly set up the beacon ritual. It was simple, a diagram drawn in coal dust, a few whispered words, and a drop of Elias's blood, the blood of an outsider, to create a confusing alien signal. When Elias completed the chant, the diagram flared with a brief, cold blue light, and then faded. A low hum, a sympathetic vibration with a true locus miles away, began to emanate from the spot, a magical ghost in the machine. "Let's go," Elias urged. "That won't fool him for long." They raced back across the blighted landscape, the constant vibration of the earth a terrifying drumbeat counting down their time. As they approached the clearing with Price's cabin, they saw their gambit had worked. In the distance, near the colliery, they could see flashes of arcane energy. They could hear a deep, resonant voice shouting commands in a language that hurt the ears. Croft had taken the bait. He had sent his main force, and possibly gone himself, to investigate the beacon. But he had not left the cellar completely unguarded. Standing over the entrance, a monstrous silhouette against the dying light, was the facilitator. He was horribly changed. The steam had boiled the skin from his face and hands, leaving a raw, weeping mockery of a man. His clothes were fused to his flesh. But he was alive, and in his remaining hand, he held the crowbar. He was no longer just a thug. He was a monster fueled by pure hatred, left to stand guard. He saw them, and a gargling roar of fury and agony tore from his throat. He charged. There was no time for tactics, no room for misdirection. The monster that had been the facilitator was 20 yards away and closing fast, a juggernaut of pure rage. The cellar. Ava screamed, shoving Elias toward the stone foundation. "Get inside and prepare the circle. I'll hold him off." "Ava, no." But she was already moving, not away, but toward the charging horror. She drew her pistol, but she wasn't aiming at him. She was aiming at the ground in front of him. She fired twice. The bullets ricocheted off the rocky soil, but that wasn't the point. The point was the instability of the land. Her shots, combined with the constant seismic tremors, were enough. A fissure, a long, ugly crack in the earth, opened up directly in the facilitator's path. He roared in frustration as he was forced to swerve, his injured leg giving way. He stumbled, falling to one knee. It was the only opening they would get. Elias didn't argue. He dove into the foundation and lowered himself into the cellar, his hands fumbling for his flashlight and the supplies. The air inside was thick and electric, the reinforced binding straining against the external pressure from Croft's assault on the town. He worked frantically, his mind a repository of Finch's desperate lessons. This new ritual required a different diagram. Not the inward spiraling circle of binding, but an outward radiating star of awakening. He used a piece of chalk provided by Finch to draw the complex pattern on the cellar floor, his lines intersecting the old sigils. Above him, he heard the sounds of the fight. The facilitator's roars, Ava's shouts, the crack of her pistol. He heard a sickening crunch of metal on stone. He worked faster, his hands shaking. He placed the catalyst, the $1,000,000 lump of coal, in the center of the new star diagram. He laid out the other components Finch had given them, a silver bowl for the invocation, a shard of obsidian for focusing, and a small leather pouch of salt for purification. A heavy thud from above made him flinch. Then silence. A terrible, absolute silence. "Ava!" he called out, his voice cracking. Her shadow fell across the opening. She was battered, her face bruised and bleeding from a cut on her forehead, but she was alive. She was holding the facilitator's crowbar in her hands. "He won't be getting up again," she said, her voice grim. She tossed the heavy iron bar aside and lowered herself into the cellar. "Is it ready?" "It's ready," Elias said, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and relief. There was no more time for... "Close enough," Elias said, showing her the address before deleting it. "He's helping us." East. Croft had realized his mistake. He was coming. Ava stepped into the center of the star, her boots flanking the dark piece of coal. She took a deep, shuddering breath and looked at Elias. Her eyes were clear and resolved. "Don't let me get lost," she said. "I won't," he promised. She closed her eyes and began the first chant. The words were ancient, guttural, the language of deep places and sleeping gods. As she spoke, the lump of coal began to glow, not with a reflected light, but from within, a faint, deep red, like the embers of a dying fire. The vibrations in the ground intensified, centering on the cellar. The walls began to shake, dust and dirt raining down from the ceiling. "It's working!" Elias shouted over the growing din. "Keep going." Ava moved to the second chant, the one that would open the conduit. Her voice grew stronger, more resonant, taking on an unnatural timbre. The glow from the coal pulsed in time with her words, growing brighter with each syllable. The air crackled. The pain started then. Ava gasped, her body arching in agony. Her connection to the binding, once a passive shield, was now an active channel, and the raw, untamed power of the GWILL began to pour into her. It was a torrent of geological time, of immense pressure and white-hot fire. She saw visions, the formation of the coal seams over millennia, the terrified faces of the Welsh miners, the rage of the entity as it was bound. It was a billion years of slumbering fury, and it was flowing into her mind. "Ava!" Elias yelled, seeing her will begin to falter. He remembered Finch's training. He grabbed the pouch of salt and threw a pinch into the silver bowl. "Ancora!" "Anchor!" he cried out, using one of the command words. "Remember your name. You are Ava Kowalski. You are the warden, not the prisoner." His voice cut through her pain, a lifeline in the storm of chaos. She grit her teeth, her knuckles white, and forced herself to continue the chant, fighting to master the power, not be consumed by it. The light from the coal was now a blinding, ferocious glare, casting writhing shadows on the shaking walls. The entire cellar felt like it was at the heart of an earthquake. And then the light changed. It solidified. It rose from the coal and wrapped itself around Ava in shimmering, heat-hazed tendrils. The power was no longer just flowing into her, it was bonding with her. It was at that moment that Julian Croft appeared at the entrance. He was no longer the calm, collected man in the suit. His clothes were disheveled, his face smeared with soot. His eyes burned with a cold, white fury. He saw what was happening, and for the first time, a look of genuine shock crossed his features. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "You are not awakening it. You are stealing it. That power is mine." He raised his hands, and the very earth of Centralia answered his call. The ground outside the cellar began to churn. Rocks, dirt, and burning coals ripped themselves from the earth and began to coalesce, forming into a massive, hulking shape. A golem, an elemental of earth and fire, animated by his will and fury. The final battle had begun. The golem Croft created was a monster of pure Centralia. Its body was a churning mass of rock and soil, its joints cracking and grinding. Veins of glowing molten coal pulsed through its torso like a demonic circulatory system, and its head was a featureless block of stone with two burning embers for eyes. It was 10 feet tall and radiated an aura of immense physical power and malevolent intent. "You thought you could claim a power you don't understand?" Croft screamed from the cellar entrance, his voice barely audible over the roar of his creation. "I will tear it from your cooling corpse." The golem took a lumbering step forward, its heavy foot shaking the very foundations of the cabin. Inside the cellar, Ava was a pillar of light and agony. The GWL's power surged through her, a wild, untamed thing. Her eyes were open, and they glowed with the same deep red embers as the golem's. She saw not with human sight, but with the earth's. She felt the golem's weight, the strain on the rock, the fire in its belly. "Ava, you have to fight." Elias yelled, his own voice sounding small and useless against the maelstrom. "Use it. Push back." She didn't seem to hear him. She was lost, adrift in the billion-year-old consciousness of the GWYLL. The power was too vast, her human mind too small. The golem raised a massive stony fist, preparing to bring it down and smash the cellar, and everything in it to dust. Elias knew he had only one chance to reach her. He scrambled to her side, ignoring the searing heat that now radiated from her skin. He grabbed her arm. The contact was like touching a live power line. A jolt of energy threw him back, but he held on, gritting his teeth against the pain. "AVA!" he roared, pouring all of his will, his fear, his desperation into her name. Stefan Kowalski refused the bargain.
Riespreis built the cage.
Your family stood guard for 150 years.
This is your legacy. This is your town.
Defend it. His words, his touch, his raw humanity were the anchor she needed. Her glowing eyes focused, the authentic article. He then looked at the oilcloth bundle Elias placed beside it. And that, I presume, is the locus minor? The anchor stone. We called it the catalyst, Elias said. Apt, Finch nodded. He finally reached out a thin, trembling hand and placed it on the cover of the journal. He closed. It was a chasm. The monster's forward momentum carried it over the edge. Your blood has complicated the formula, Sergeant. It teetered for a moment, its stony arms windmilling, before it fell with a ground-shaking crash into the newly opened abyss. Croft stared. "Ow. Tell me everything. Start from when you received the book. Omit nothing." For the next hour, Elias and Ava recounted their story. Himself. The sigil on the road, the voice, the attack in the cellar, the decoy. He thrust his hands forward, and a vortex of swirling razor-sharp rock shards materialized in the air, aimed directly at Ava. But Ava was no longer just a state trooper. She was the GWLL's vessel. She met his attack not with a shield, but with a roar of her own. She stamped her foot, and a shockwave of pure seismic force erupted from the cellar floor. The wave of power met Croft's vortex and shattered it, the rock shards turning to harmless dust. The shockwave continued, slamming into Croft and throwing him against the far wall with bone-jarring force. They are not academics. They are not explorers. They are harvesters. They believe that supernatural entities, spirits, deities, are nothing more than naturally occurring sources of energy, like oil or uranium, and they believe it is their right to exploit them. The explanation sent a chill down Elias's spine. It was a cold, corporate, uniquely modern kind of evil. The GWYLL, Finch continued, is a particularly rich prize. A Class 4 telluric entity. A raw primal being of earth and fire. It has no higher consciousness, no sense of morality. It is pure, elemental power. To a man like Croft, it is the ultimate untapped resource. Croft scrambled backward, his arrogance gone, replaced by pure animal terror. He had spent his life dominating lesser spirits, binding them to his will. He had never faced a power so raw, so absolute, so utterly unwilling to be controlled. "No," he shrieked. "Have just made my work significantly more complicated." He looked at the circle on the floor, at the blood-anointed piece of coal. His smile faltered for the first time, replaced by a flicker of genuine annoyance. "You haven't just reinforced the binding," he said, his voice losing its pleasant tone and taking on a dangerous edge. "You've woven a new thread into it. Her bloodline." He looked directly at Ava. Price and his fools used their own life force as the key. You've just made you the key. To undo this, I can't simply break the lock. I'll have to destroy it. He took a step forward. "So, I will ask you once, very politely. Give me the catalyst," he said, pointing at the lump of coal. "And you," he looked at Ava, "will come with me. We have a decoupling to perform." "Go to hell," Ava spat. Croft sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. "I was afraid you'd say that." He raised his empty hand, his palm facing them. The air around his hand began to shimmer, to distort, like heat rising from asphalt. The low hum returned, but this time it wasn't coming from the ground. It was coming from him. "You think you're the first to read from a dusty book and think you understand power," he sneered. "You are children playing with matches. I have been studying the GWYLL and entities like it my entire life. I don't bargain with them. I collect them." The air in the cellar crackled with energy. Elias felt the hair on his arms stand on end. This was not a man who needed a crowbar. He was the weapon. "The binding is strong now," Elias said, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "You can't touch it. You can't touch us." Croft laughed, a genuine, mirthless sound. "Oh, my dear boy. You reinforced the cellar door. You paid no attention at all to the walls." He snapped his fingers. And from the dark earthen walls of the cellar, pale, grasping hands began to emerge, clawing their way out of the dirt.